So my name is John Pizzuro. I am currently the Internet Crimes Against Children Commander for the New Jersey State Police or the state of New Jersey. So one of the things I'm going to talk about is social engineering. Where I come from on my background is more of a neuroscience background, chats, people, proactive investigations, even from a cyber component. I've been doing these type of investigations for the last 22 years. And as they were just talking about AI, the challenge with AI is what data do you put into it? And I think that we're at a crossroads with technology is that we're trying to simplify things and trying to get more information out. But the reality is that people are still changing things. So until we actually put that data in an AI system, you have people that are continually manipulating from a psychological perspective. And it's amazing the amount of people that still get duped or get basically allow themselves to actually give information no matter how many times we talk about it. So what is social engineering? I'm sure everyone knows this from a cyber component, but social engineering is simply the art of manipulation. And I see it on a daily basis. I see it today with children. And one of the concepts too, when we're talking about cyber, so we get, for example, we get cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And when you look at behavior of children right now, everyone is using technology. As time goes on, these are your people that you're going to be basically going up against, so to speak. So because of that, and because of their use of apps and technology, and we try to make the easy button, it leaves us to be manipulated because what technology does to us. And this is what some people don't necessarily understand. It's the ability to get people to take action that they would normally ordinarily not want to. It's more than unwittingly providing people, for example, to provide personal information. We can use it for proactive investigations. We can use it to provide information. So a lot of times, for example, I spend a lot of time in Tor and the dark net, and I'm in different communities and different groups. Obviously, I would love a technology solution to identify everyone. Well, because of the anonymity, I need to use another skill set in order to do that. So what I have to use is the art of social engineering, believe it or not, in the same way that people manipulate people online. My job when I'm chatting with someone or talking to someone is to get them into the clear net where basically somehow I can identify them. And that starts with a lot with language, trusting online. And I'm going to talk about that specifically as I move through these slides. So you have all different types of cyber risks from pretexting, phishing, tailgating, social engineering. So from the essence of that is that people are going to try to test no matter what system, whatever program you have, whether it be a computer program, whether it be a defense program, whether it be your training, people test and look for weaknesses. And that's ultimately what we do, right? And this is what criminals do, is that they're going to test something and see how much they can get through it. But they do it by practice and practice and practice and an unwavering ability to keep doing it. So I am not going to spend a lot of time talking about these terms. I'm going to start because of time's sake, but whether it's phishing with an email trick to target the person to revealing sensitive information, whether it be spear phishing, more targeted form of phishing, baiting. These are all terms from an aspect that social engineers will use. But what I want everyone to understand from this presentation is the ability and the art of manipulation and how people go about it, how we get duped. No matter what we do, you can be the biggest security-minded person in the world, yet you can be dating someone, yet you're sending money to someone or you're meeting someone on a date that you have no idea that you think is your long lost love. Why is that? It's because what happens is there's a lot of neurological and psychological factors that impact us. Phishing, tailgating, and pretexting. Again, trust. So what I want you to rely on, or when I talk about pretext, and relies on forming a false sense of trust with the victim. That's what everyone does. It tries to establish trust. And I'll talk about this in a few slides, but the reality is that this device here has made us more trusting. Even though we are going to whatever beliefs we want. For example, whatever your political affiliation is or whatever your belief is, you are in a group that does that. The Tor group that I'm in, the pedo support community group, has a group of like-minded people. And what you find on Tor, and this is fascinating, is that I spend a lot of time on the behavior aspect. Yes, you can go get credit card numbers. Yes, you can get passwords. All that is on there. But the fascinating part is the chat groups on the Onion router, because what they're doing is they spend time talking about it. We're all here in a conference talking about different ways to protect ourselves. Yet there's someone on here posting this stuff all on Tor. I could tell you my PowerPoints, not mine specifically, but there's been PowerPoints from the FBI on Tor. Everything that you do and use, there's always a countermeasure. Again, this is going to go on forever. And as AI progresses, the same thing will happen. So what's your best defense? So my question to everyone here is, why does, I know every cybersecurity firm talks about how not to let your information out. I can't tell you the amount of webinars or trainings or what have you that I've been in where people tell you, this is what you can't do. Don't share this. Don't open this email. Yet people do it time and time again. So why? Why is there an increase? It's because people unwittingly don't realize and are trusting more when it comes to an online. This just happens naturally. If people, for example, get an oxytocin rush or a dopamine rush, all this impacts us. And I'm going to explain this more. So what I started doing is I started asking the right questions. So how can someone break in? What are they doing? What are their processes? So the idea is getting in someone's mindset in order to really understand someone to get the things that you need. So it spends time from the psychology aspect of it. We all want the easy button, right? Well, in 22 years of just straight investigations, there is no easy button. And I think we're all looking for a solution to make it easier. However, for everything that we do, someone's trying to find a way around it. But understanding the mindset. So I'm a certified fraud examiner. They had the fraud triangle. Everyone has an acronym or ideology to explain that. But the reality is that people will try to gain people. And when they do that and they're successful once, they will continue it time and time again. So think about the amount of emails that someone has to send in order to get someone to compromise themselves. Thousands. But it works because ultimately someone's going to do it. So it's the psychology of it. It's understanding why. So when I look at people that are trying to gain access, it's more than just, let's say, getting back, although you'll have employees of a cyber company or a company, it doesn't matter what the company is, where you fire them and they're basically looking to compromise and get back at the company. So we all understand those intrinsic motivations, but how do people still continue to let it happen? That's really where I started to get into. It starts, and again, this isn't a class on the brain, but I'm telling you what your brain does. The amygdala is it's your reptilian brain. When you're stressed and traumatized, it causes your amygdala to be hijacked. And when that happens, that is your way into people. So while we talk about hacking and we talk about how cybersecurity and how people unwittingly get in through programs, the same thing is happening to us from a biological perspective. Because what happens is once the amygdala gets hijacked, we lose our logical thoughts of how to go about something. So emotional processing by the amygdala can occur basically when the subconscious can be affected by sensory input. So basically stress. So, and I've done this with investigation. Stress is a big um, breaking point of people to let information in. It happens when your brain reacts. It's your fight, flight, or freeze situation. We lose the ability to communicate effectively. Autopilot's in charge. When a social engineer triggers a strong emotional response to the target, it can reduce the person's ability to think logically. And ultimately, that's what they're trying to do. In proactive investigations, it causes people to make mistakes. For example, there are times that I've done um, numerous prospective wiretaps just on human behavior, wiretapping emails from Chinese nationals, for example, coming around sending things here. But what I've noticed is that when stress is impacted, people will ultimately make mistakes and people become more susceptible. So when you are tension and your attention is someplace else and you're stressed, let's say you're at work and your workload is 100 times, you have 100 files, or you have 100 items that on your agenda every day that you need to get through, and you get an email and you have that stress. That's what makes people victimized and targeted more easily, because you're not thinking. And stress tends to do that. And I know that just from an investigative standpoint, that it really has a factor. So the idea is, today more than ever, is technology has created a space where we can't think. Our attention span, for example, the attention span of a goldfish is 8 seconds. Ours is right now 6 seconds. And it's because of this. And I think what's happening is that all this information and the attempt to process everything is making things a lot more difficult for us. So from a technology perspective, we are more prone to using our devices. And as a result, it has enabled us to be a little bit more manipulated. I know this is the case for children, even from a cyber aspect. You're having more and more people being compromised. I know just recently during COVID, for example, we've had at least 10 or 12 individuals that have given away their life savings for some type of charity just from a cyber aspect. And because the person gave them their password and gave them their information. So why it's so effective is because they're easily taking charge of this, is because people don't understand what technology is doing that. If I had a slide, I don't have this slide here, but I do it someplace else. But the Matrix, for example, we're all kind of plugged into that world. So I am a big believer in human behavior. It's what I do. So when we're talking about risk mitigation, and we're talking about risk management, and we're talking about the overall aspect, people don't take into account what they can't see. So I am looking at the human element. I'm looking at the human perspective. I'm looking at how people are set up from a standpoint of stress factors. So all that from a risk factor, that's what I'm looking for when people are trying to get in. And I could tell you this, I have examples, having investigated the Genovese crime family, organized crime family, cyber criminals. It doesn't matter, is that everyone is using what works, and they're looking for a way in. And unfortunately, we are giving that way in, because let's face it, from a cybersecurity perspective, if you have proper software, you have proper mechanisms in place, and you update everything and you're on everything, the reality is that, hey, you can pretty feel good. But then all of a sudden, someone gives them the keys to the kingdom. And that's where really social engineering comes from. It's the psychological and neurological perspective, because all criminals are trying to do, and cyber criminals are trying to manipulate someone to get them to do what they want to do. So it's really about the art of manipulation. So again, you might be like, hey, this is a cybersecurity conference, and this guy's talking about the brain and talking about neurochemistry. Well, the reason for that is that neurochemicals create us to act a certain way. When people go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, they are given inhibitors and enhancers of certain types of neurotransmitters. For example, is that the dopamine dependence has caused different things with likes, followers, and views. So this is how people are getting manipulated. So when you start with neurotransmitters, you look at dopamine. So dopamine is the feel good, basically, chemical that controls communication to the brain. And it's kind of like that drug. And what's happening right now is that we have become dopamine dependent as a society, and we all fall prey to it. It's because that attention. So when we're talking about online behavior, the likes, followers, and views, all that gains that. So for a person to actually manipulate someone, they're playing to that. They're playing to that attention right now in an online perspective. Um, for example, especially when you're talking about going after CEOs and you're going after personalities, more someone who's in the forefront and who's used to attention. When you give them attention, it's reason because of dopamine. If I have a good example is that you post a vacation and no one gives you a like. And then all of a sudden, a couple people give you a like. And now 100 people give you a like. And now 200 people give you a like. What happens is that if I want to manipulate someone by just paying attention to that, it will give me an inroads because that's what's making that person feel good. And at some point, you need more and more. It's kind of like a drug. It's kind of like gambling. All of a sudden, it starts at this level and moves up. And that's what happens from a cyber aspect when people are trying to manipulate someone. And what they're not getting is they're not getting serotonin. And I'll take this result as COVID, for example. So COVID has caused even more of this because we are all quarantined. We're not showing up at the office. We're not having lunch together. Everything's virtual. So we're not getting the serotonin that we have. We're not happier. We're not calmer. We're not more focused. So the reason for that is serotonin actually helps us with that. But ultimately, is that it's oxytocin, which really is the neurotransmitter that will basically underlie trust. And that's what it's self-producing. So you're producing oxytocin. And when you have that, even though it's a fake relationship and you believe someone you want to trust, oxytocin is the neurotransmitter that really impacts you. For example, for anyone in the honeymoon phase before, that's nothing but oxytocin. So what you're trying to produce in that, or what people produced in that, is that sense of oxytocin. So like a neuroeconomist, Paul Zak, studies virtuous science of trust. His early experiments revealed people who felt connected and trusted each other experienced what he called the virtuous cycles of higher oxytocin levels. So, and he did this in studies, and he found that oxytocin significantly raised their motivation to trust people. And that's where people fall victim to it. And this is where companies have their employees unwittingly giving information, is because they talk to someone on the outside. So no matter what you tell them, right? We tell them, hey, don't trust anyone. We tell them, hey, be careful of this type of email. Don't click on this. But that human interaction overrides that need for safety. So, for example, has anyone here have ever been betrayed by someone that you trusted completely, though every fiber in your body told you the warning signs? And later on, you say, you know what? I saw the warning signs. Because neuroscientific research shows that in many ways, our brain are hardwired to trust others. So when we're talking about don't click on this, don't do this, we're not spending time telling our people that, hey, this is what's going on in your brain. Because I think if people were a little bit aware of that and aware of how people manipulate people, rather than telling people, hey, don't click on this, don't do this, you don't do this, this is how people are doing it. We don't talk about the psychology of it and how people are going about it. So I think maybe that self-education there and awareness will help. So, for example, in this neuroscience of trust, they did this study, and what they did is they they were playing an economic investment game with three different players, right? So a close friend, a stranger, and a computerized slot machine. So that's what they tell everyone. In reality, every instance, the participants were playing against the computer or an AI program. All right. So, and with a simple algorithm that simply reciprocated actions worthy of trust exactly 50% of the time, everyone chose the close friend to be more rewarding. Yet all three of them were computer programs. So again, it's what happens in your mind. So back to like AI, again, those aspects, even with that, again, you're going to have AI programs. We already have bots that do certain things. But again, all this is implemented in order to really dupe people. It illustrates, though, our innate human desire to connect with others and create close-knit bonds. Like blind trust. This is what leads to even Ponzi schemes. No matter how much we tell people, people fall victim to it. No matter how much we tell companies, companies fall victim to it. So when we're talking about ransomware and we're talking about network intrusions and all the things that happen to a company, is that ultimately we're letting people in because of trust or blind trust. And that is what's working on people in order to do that. So again, so technology can't solve necessarily everything. Sometimes even with that education and awareness. Believe me, if I can have a button to press where I can just physically interact and chat with people and get all the information I do it in a heartbeat. But the reality is that I believe that as technology grows, we'll get better with that, but we're only as good as the information that we can put and program into that. And what worries me is that people are imperfect, and then everything changes as we change. So one thing social engineers do is a thing called priming. So priming is basically an implicit memory effect in which exposure leads to the stimulus influence later on. So what they're doing is I'm priming you. I am priming you. I'm going to throw something in your mind, and then later on, I'm going to go retrieve it. So a lot of times, you're trying to get a subconscious thought out of someone. For example, if I gave everyone a thought here and you were walking down the street and you just said, "Hey, I just had a memory," you just didn't have that memory. What happened was something triggered it to open it up. And that's what priming is. Priming is a phenomenon in which certain stimulus will open something up to someone. So I might have some contact or conversation with someone, and you're going to see innocuous conversation. So from a cybersecurity aspect, how far back are you going on chats or logs or people or communication with someone? Is it a singular one? Is it multiple ones? All that is important because again, we're trying to get people to move. For example, if a person who sees the word doctor will be faster to recognize the word nurse. Words really mean a lot in that context. Priming can have surprising effects on our behavior. For example, if we could see an image of money, it can affect our political reviews. Or instance, reading words associated with the elderly can make people move a lot more slowly. So again, those are things that we necessarily don't think of all the time, but the really smart people and the smart social engineers use those techniques. And then it turns out to like what's happening with technology. So technology has really changed us because it beckons us. It takes up mobile space. It alters perceptions of your options. So we all rely on technology simply ever in the cyber world. But because of that reliance, it's changing us in the way we think. It reinforces your beliefs. It collects information about you that can be used against you later. It keeps serving up the next best thing. Again, it shortens your attention span. It can trick you into thinking that something is more. And overall, it turns everyday actions into games. That is why social engineering is successful today. And believe it or not, you can use it in your investigations. I am one of the rare people that when I get an email from someone who's trying to do something, I engage them in conversation. I am known to like when the phone rings and it's it's the IRS. We need you're going to jail. I'm like, oh really? Do you know Agent And I make a Agent Smith and go, no, I don't know Agent Smith. Well, he's in your office. Can you put him on? So I engage people because I am just testing their own interactions. And we today, computer programs will test, right? We test, we test, we test, we test, we test until we find something that we go in there. But people do the same exact thing as well. So when I was talking about likes, UCLA did a brain mapping study that showed how brains light up in certain areas when likes are there. Now, I will say this for your new young employees that are past millennials, but you're talking about that grew up in the generation with these technology, they're very susceptible to likes, followers, and views. And because of that, their brain lights up in a certain way. So if someone's not getting attention and I'm a social engineer looking to get information out of a company, that's how I'm going to do it. So again, technology and its impact on, again, people are being groomed. It's not just children, it's adults as well. Dopamine dependent, no serotonin, oxytocin, social engineering and proactive investigations have that same effect. And we could do the same thing when we are doing our own investigations. So this is what I've done in just simple wiretaps or conversations, is that social engineering on a conversation, a phone conversation, can happen. So what happens? Why are people manipulated? Well, number one, you're the expert, or you're believed to be. So if people perceive you as a competent authority and trustworthy, they will do what you ask them. Fear, again, that's another tool. Likability, people inherently want to be liked, and charismatic people will have a pull. So if you look at some of the biggest scammers in the world and the daters, and yet someone has no matter how many relationships you see where someone has taken their entire fortune or manipulated into marriage and they just don't see it. So charisma. So from our own psychology, we want to be liked. So there's a lot going on. So is it believable? That is the number one factor. So if I send an email that looked like it was from Citibank and it had everything in there and it had the president and everything else, is it believable? Is it conceivable? Does it make sense? All this can also be introduced in your investigation. So when I am interviewing someone or I am talking to someone online in a chat aspect or a phone investigation, I will use all this to my advantage. It's storytelling. It's coming up with a story and then making that story believable. Social engineers will use that, and we can use that in an investigation in order to get that information that we need. And it's about really getting into influence in the psychological aspect. I mean, I teach a 2-day course just on cognitive interviewing and what happens and how people are influenced. So I am really only giving you like Cliff Note versions of things, but the way people get persuaded and the way there's sensory production, for example, words, if you're auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, if you're matching the same auditory words or the same visual words or the same persuasion words, that will in fact have something to do with it. When I'm talking to someone from a social engineering aspect, I'm matching your tone. I'm slowing it down. I'm talking like this. All that is a way to manipulate you. The idea is people like people that are like themselves, and that's how people manipulate people. So it's basically human behavior is the response of individuals or groups of human to external stimuli. In other words, is that people react to what they're presented. We're very reactionary, and how we do that is really important to understand. So, like when I was talking about words, just to give you an example, if I told everyone a drug has a 5% death rate, or I told you have a drug has a 95% survival rate, it's the same thing. However, a lot more people will die if I told them the drug had a 5% death rate. Language has a really big impact on what we do, and we don't even realize it because it's in our subconscious. Real quick, for example, is that we have 40 conscious thoughts per minute, and in the same time, we have 4 million subconscious thoughts. So all that's being played upon when you're in a company. That's why unwittingly you're giving away the keys to the kingdom. And again, fear of missing out. That's a big thing. Well, it's not just for stocks and people just end up getting manipulated, but a game of catch study is basically three people playing catch. All of a sudden, I start playing catch with one person. I leave one person out, and that person's left out. And that person feels automatically upset because they're not participating. But the reality is, until they realize it's a stupid game of catch, why should they care? They will walk away. But until that point, they feel that they've been left out. Again, they are causing fear. They are causing this from a psychological, neurological perspective in order to get people. And it's about social proof. So it starts with trust. You're using stress to your advantage, rapport, matching, and mirroring. All that impacts what's happening today. In order to influence someone, you have to know what influences them. So unwittingly, social engineers will pace and lead, and they are reverse engineers. You're trying to find out the model of the world, what they value, what they need. So that's what they're probing for, because they are going to get that from your company, and they are going to, and that those employees are going to give that information. But you can also use that from an investigation standpoint. And just so you know, these are all the techniques that I've used it for. You can use it for cybersecurity, tax evasion, money laundering. All this are types of investigative techniques where people are using that. And all we're doing is we're taking what the suspects and the criminals do, and we're using the same techniques against them. So the idea in social engineering and covert recordings is to introduce stimuli. It's about pushing buttons. It's about creating a sense of urgency. When people have a sense of urgency, that is what you kind of have. It's creating a sense of urgency. So that's what people will do, is they'll create a sense of urgency. From an investigation standpoint, I will do the same thing, because when I create a sense of urgency, people don't think logically. They will give me more information, and unwittingly, they will provide me with information that they normally wouldn't. So again, it goes from both perspectives. So again, this is a very quick perspective. I know I'm flying through this, but there's a lot of information that I talk about, but I'm just trying to give you kind of the highlights. So what do social engineers do to manipulate people from an email perspective? They will actually try to engage people. So I have this phone up here, for example, is that I was talking to a Genovese crime soldier who I needed his phone number. And all I did was I called him up, and I needed him to tell me who this was, and I needed him to give me the phone number, right? Or I knew what the phone number was, but I needed that for an affidavit. So I called him up, and I pretended I'm like that. Hi, I'm sorry, I'm looking for Tom, and I really can't find him, and I don't know what to do. And guy starts apologizing. I'm sorry to bother you. Who's this? Do I have the phone number? Can you explain what phone number? He goes, oh, this is 1234556. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And I think I got the wrong number. And I'm like, who am I talking to? And he gives me the name. And ultimately, that's what I put in the affidavit. So basically, all I did was call him, and I created a sense of urgency, and I apologized. And the idea was to try to get as much information out of him as I can. So you get less than 90 seconds, just so you realize, is that you get less than 90 seconds to really get someone on the phone. But it starts by matching the words. It starts by matching the tone. It starts matching the tonality. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I'll spend a lot of time on a phone call matching someone. I'll be matching their breathing. I'll be matching, because all this is biological, and this is how people get manipulated. You're matching voice speed, your volume, and breathing. The idea is it's developing rapport on a phone. And that's what people do. The really successful ones are able to really develop rapport on a phone. So you can do this with crafting emails. And again, from a social engineering aspect, this is what people are doing. They're matching the sensory language. They're matching the information in there. They're matching the style. They're matching the words. They are looking at what internal emails are sent, and they're matching it the same way. So if the email of the CEO is something that normally he does in that style, I'm going to match that and do that same exact thing. That's where it's believable, because you are too busy. You're creating a sense of urgency. Hey, I need this now. You look at it real quick. All of a sudden, it matches this. All this is what you end up getting. So you're matching what works in your situation. You're matching um, basically how the content. The idea is what you want to do is influences the business of people. It's being a good listener and it's making people feel important. So you're talking to people in the terms of their interest. And that's basically what a cyber aspect does. And that's what people are trying to do. So I'm just getting through here and I'll get through some questions. People hear what they want to hear and what they hope for. That's what you have to realize. Also, people aren't cynical like law enforcement. So whether you're a victim of social engineering or using an investigative technique, remember people can be influenced. The idea is that you're manipulating everything that's going on in their mind. So one of the things is it's trying to think outside the box. And I've been doing this for 22 years. And I can tell you this, from corruption, from CEOs to Genevieve's crime family, all people act the same. And the neuroscience of it and how to get people to do things really works. And that's what social engineers do really, really, really well. And that's why you're giving people, and that's why you have ransomware and all the other things that are out there from a technology standpoint. It's because people allow that. So I just want to mention too, is that I am the training director for the New Jersey chapter of uh, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, New Jersey. So acfenj.org. So in case you're interested in joining, there's a slide for that. And then I'm going to put my questions up because I see a lot in the chat. So I want to try to answer some of them because I know I'm up against from a time perspective. So let me see if I can look some of these. Why do you engage scam callers? I was told this promotes even more scam callers. Do you have more info on this? I engage them is because I'm trying to find out about them. I'm trying to find more information about someone. So it's not just a game, but it's a modality, because every time I talk to someone, I get the ability to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And what I have found is the theory of practice of basically how to get as much information as possible. Just looking at the chat here, trying to see what else we got. Interesting perspective on why cyber awareness campaigns aren't as important. Any more questions that I have for anyone?
There's a question here that says, interesting perspective on why our cyber awareness programs aren't as effective as we hoped. And then it says, people seem to want to help their managers, and that seems to be a weakness. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, yeah, people want to help their managers. I think the aspect is that no one is communicating about this, and this is what no one's talking about. And we're not having these type of conversations. And when you get into that pleasing aspect, you're trying to do whatever you can in your role. And there's people that don't want to do the wrong thing and don't want to ask questions because we hate to ask questions because we don't want to look stupid. So all that is important in that aspect.